Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay. This is from Scientology101.org. Scientology 101, A Beginner's Guide to Dianetics, Scientology, and L. Ron Hubbard. RPF Rehabilitation Project Force. Children there right now, and government officials don't care. Police officers don't care. The following article would clearly show how the principles contained in the Brainwashing Manual, or Psychopolitics Manual, have been applied to the Sea organization. This manual was said to have been written by Russian communists, but was in fact written entirely by L. Ron Hubbard. Wonder where he got the information. See Psychopolitics Manual for evidence of this, the Sea organization. The Sea organization was begun in 1967 by L. Ron Hubbard, aka Ron LRH, the Commodore and Source. The audacity for him to take Source as his name, it's just sick. Hubbard's megalomania-inspired story was that in an earlier incarnation, he was a galactic good guy and leader who defeated forces of evil, and that he had been supported by his loyal officers. He could never have been like a low-ranking soldier, could he? He says that these same individuals are now drawn into joining the Sea Org so that they may rejoin the fellow loyal officers from millions of years ago. A 1997 issue of the Sea Org magazine, number 20, The High Winds, tells new recruits, "It's not the first time you've been part of an elite." I love that word. The fiery rush of pride that's been resting in your soul will remind you, this isn't the first time we've been together. Welcome home, shipmate. When you think about it, that is like some really extreme brainwashing or MK Ultra. We've known each other for lifetimes. How's that for love bombing or like guilting or, like putting a person into a corner? You know what I mean? While hailed as custodians of the OT levels, most Sea Org members, like children, have never seen even one secret level and must wait patiently for the day when they will be able to do the exalted level of OT3, and at a cost. The Sea Org provides a source of cheap labor for the day-to-day management and servicing of Scientology organizations. Yeah, especially those child laborers. Its members sign billion-year contracts, wear uniforms, and are subject to extreme forms of Scientology ethics, like children. They are expected to obey orders unquestionably. Obey, slave. Here, individuality is an out ethics. Yeah, that's the completely snuff out individuality. It is an out ethics indulgence. Parents see little of their children by choice. Bonds between married couples are weakened. Children receive indoctrination, like that came from nothing, right? As Sea Org cadets and become subject to all aspects of Sea Org ethics. Sea Org members are expected to report the most minor infractions by friends or family. Such infractions include not only actions, but also unacceptable opinions and questions. The only loyalty which should exist is to the state, Scientology. Don't you guys find that it's weird that they said it like that? Because in all of the totalitarian cultures, they always talk about the state is the highest, isn't it? All of them. The Brainwashing Manual. In rearranging loyalties, we must have a command of their values. Like the last 5 years. In the animal individual, the first loyalty is to himself. This is destroyed by demonstrating errors to him, showing him that without Scientology, he does not remember, cannot act, or does not trust himself. Like the last 5 years? You guys know what I'm talking about. Is a live-filled and implanted humanoid. The second loyalty is to the family unit. This is all the inversions. His parents and brothers and sisters. This is destroyed by lessening the value of marriage. Kind of what's going on right now, isn't it? Kind of what's going on right now. By making an easiness of divorce, and I'm going to add in there child marriages. What better way to abuse a child than to force them to marry? Then it's not called the R word. Just amongst one of the abuses. By making an easiness of divorce and raising the children whenever possible by the state. Scientology Sea Org. The next loyalty is to his friends and local environment. This is destroyed by lowering his trust and bringing about reportings, knowledge reports, upon him allegedly by his fellows. The next is to the state, Scientology Sea Org, and this for the purposes of communism. Scientology is the only loyalty which should exist. Sea Org ethics under Commodore Hubbard on the flagship. He was a flunky. He was never a Commodore. Until late 1975, the headquarters for the Sea Org was a flagship Apollo, which cruised about the Mediterranean and East Atlantic, populated with 200 to 300 Sea Org members. Let's also talk about the children that were on those ships. And I think they still are. Two to 300 Sea Org members and L. Ron Hubbard, their Commodore, fake Commodore. It was here that Hubbard first instituted Sea Org ethics. With Sea Org ethics, Hubbard had the opportunity to apply aspects of the Brainwashing Manual that required complete control over a person and his environment, such as could exist on a ship at sea. It's isolation. These applications in contemporary times are usually relegated to remote fenced-in locations or guarded areas, usually in basements, in large buildings or building complexes. A Sea Org member's ethics condition is measured by his obedience to orders and by his statistics, which are supposed to reflect his degree of production for Scientology. Those assigned a low ethics condition, called downstats, must work their way up through those above. These conditions are power, affluence, normal operation, emergency, danger, non-existence, liability, doubt, enemy, treason, confusion. Ethics included the imposition of degrading and exhausting labor, prohibition on bathing, food and sleep deprivation. Mind you guys, how many stories have we heard about the children that were put through this and still are? and prolonged confinement in various dirty and sometimes dangerous locations, such as the space used to store the chain. I've talked about this numerous times, that held the ship's anchor. That's the anchor room. For a time, Hubbard instituted instant ethics for auditor trainees, like children, mostly for those training to be the then highest levels, Class 8s. This consisted of the offender being thrown over the side of the ship, sometimes blindfolded. So they did that to the children. The accounts that follow are a sampling of the many that have been provided by former members. Some former members are afraid to speak publicly of their experiences with Scientology. Those quoted here are among the bolder ones. They are also some of the stronger personalities, having removed themselves from Scientology and regained their independence of thought on the topic. Take this all with a grain of salt. It's my opinion. John Osley, former Sea Org member and Class 8 auditor, interviewed several years after leaving Scientology on the topic of going up the ethics conditions on the Scientology flagship Apollo. What do I keep talking about on the Apollo ship? You know, all the rapes of the girls and the women? It would be a good idea to keep a list of the names. You know, reasonable deduction. You had to do 48 hours nonstop amends in doubt, at which point you were upgraded to liability. Then you'd have to do another 24 hours of nonstop amends. I'm talking about hard physical labor. Nathan Rich talked about this in his book. At the Lower Ranch. At which point you're upgraded to non-existence. You then had to do 12 more hours with people all over your physical ass and your mental faculties. And as a person winds down, he becomes more and more vulnerable. So it's a will trip. More like a trap. Otto Roos, another Sea Org member and Class 12 auditor, after ending his involvement with Scientology, wrote of his time aboard the flagship and his determination to avoid the most unpleasant aspects of Sea Org ethics. Having myself experienced the atrocities of war, unlike many of my friends, I swore I wasn't going down into those old rusty bilge tanks for up to a week without sleep, chipping rust while masters at arms checked outside to ensure the chipping didn't stop. This is so sick. Refusal to let them sleep over many days. That's brainwashing 101. Remember how many of us weren't getting sleep in 2020? The brainwashing manual. The body is less able to resist a stimulus if it has insufficient food and is weary. Refusal to let them sleep over many days, denying them adequate food, then brings about an optimum state for the receipt of stimulus, indoctrination. Hannah Eltringham Whitfield, another former Sea Org member, who became a Class 6 auditor prior to the inception of the Sea Org, on the travails of out-ethics Sea Org crew. They were treated like criminals. They would get their food delivered by way of buckets, lowered into the air ducts. The punishment lasted from 24 hours to, on a few occasions, a couple of weeks. Since they were not allowed to use the toilet facilities, ducked inmates had to find some corner in which to relieve themselves best they could, creating the stench of human excrement and urine throughout the ducts. That's horrible. Hannah Whitfield described one of several incidents of Sea Org ethics being applied to children. Here we go. One thing I can give this lady, Hannah Whitfield, she really spoke out about what was happening with the children. She really did. Which is less than I can say for a lot of folks. He, Hubbard, put his 4.5-year-old little boy, Derek Green, into the chain locker for 2 days and 2 nights. So he's a monster. Anyone that would do that is a fucking monster. It's a closed metal container. It's wet. It's full of water with seaweed. It smells bad. But Derek was sitting up on the chain in this place on his own, in the dark for 2 days and 2 nights. This is trauma-based mind control. He was not allowed to go to the potty. He had to go in the chain locker on his own, soiling himself. Where's Mom? Where's his mom? 2.5-year-old baby. Or 4.5. 4.5-year-old baby. He was given food. I never went near the chain locker while he was in there, but people heard him crying. That is sheer total brutality. Yes, it is. That's child abuse. There were several first-hand accounts of this occurrence, including one provided by the child's mother, who left the Sea Org sometime later. Hubbard mentioned the presence of children on the flagship in writings from the early 1980s. The Sea Org magazine High Winds, number 20, quotes source from these writings. In 1968 on the Apollo, then named the Royal Scotsman, the first messenger stood watch. The first messenger was a little boy whose parents were Scientologists. What is she trying to say here? Well, he's a Scientologist too. While the first Commodore's messenger was a little boy, the vast majority of messengers were and are teenage girls. What have I said about this? They were just ordering them up. You see the fat, bald, middle-aged men, filth. They're bringing in these teenage girls for a reason. According to Hannah Whitfield, the main Commodore's messenger's duties at the time were to walk around with LRH, carry his ashtray, and light his cigarettes. You imagine this? That's freedom of religion? And carry messages for him and answers back to him. Tonya Burden was a Sea Org child and became a Commodore's messenger at age 13. Let's see if she gives up some of the truth. In 1977, at the age of 18, ironically, it was 18, right? You guys get it? Disillusioned with Scientology and its founder, she, with some difficulty, left the organization. In a 1982 legal affidavit, she wrote of her early training to become a messenger. Oh, wait, she became a Commodore's messenger at 13. What do you guys know, how many rapes have we heard about on the Apollo? A lot of them. Of the young girls. During the training routines, myself and 2 others practiced carrying messages to LRH. We had to listen to a message repeated in the same tone and practice salutes. What a joke. Ghosting was on-the-job training, where I learned how to serve LRH. I followed another messenger around and observed her carry his hat, light his cigarettes, carry his ashtray, and prepare his toiletries. Eventually, I performed these duties. As his servant, I would sit outside his room and help him out of bed when he called messenger. Little slave. That's what she was, a slave. I responded by assisting him out of bed. Like he can't get his sorry you guys, I'm going to swear. Like he can't get his sorry fat ass out of bed himself. He needs a little girl to help him. And we all know, we've heard stories about what he did to his daughter Diana. It's a fact. This is so sick. I bet Rinder didn't talk about this, did he? I responded by assisting him out of bed, lighting a cigarette, running his shower, preparing his toiletries, and helping him dress. Like, because, you know, fat man couldn't dress himself. He frequently exploded if he found dust or dirt or smelled soap on his clothes. That is why we use 13 buckets to rinse. Unreal. Unreal. So the children were there just to be slaves to him. All girls, I think. I haven't heard of, well, I've only heard of one person that was a Commodore messenger that was a boy. While on the Apollo, I observed numerous punishments meted out. On a number of occasions, I saw people placed in chain lockers. Oh, they love to put the kids in there, too. On the boat, on direct order of Hubbard. These lockers were small, smelly holes, covered by grates where the chain for the anchor was stored. It's to break your will. I saw one boy held in there for 30 nights, crying and begging to be released. Monsters, you guys. Monsters. And you cannot tell me that there weren't little children's bodies thrown over these ships that died. You can't tell me that. He was only allowed to come out to clean the bilges where the sewer and the refuge of the ship collected. These people are monsters. It's not just Hubbard. Anyone who's like allowing that to happen is just as bad. Messengers in Scientology are supposed to be literal extensions of L. Ron Hubbard, slaves. And their sole purpose is to serve him like a slave. They have their own org called the Commodore's Messenger Org. With Hubbard absent, they are the absolute servants of whomever represents Hubbard. Wasn't Rinder working really closely with Hubbard as a young teenager? He wasn't the only one. In the Sea Org magazine, High Winds number 20, there is an advertisement that states, young Scientologists, like children, wishing to join this elite group may apply at one of the CMO Continental offices. But apparently the United States government can't. Here it is right in black and white, but they can't seem to figure out they need to arrest these people. Qualifications are high ethics level, unwavering dedication to salvaging this planet, and a burning desire to help Source. Hubbard was Source. Excuse me. In a lot of circles, Source means God. That was him mocking everyone. The magazine also includes quotes from Hubbard addressing the CMO. You can function only so long as Simon Bolivar policy applies. Commodore's messengers have power because they are Commodore's messengers. The Simon Bolivar policy letter is about power being connected and contributing to a power. This is commonly phrased as flowing power to power. The power being Hubbard, of course. The Bolivar policy of 12 February 1967, formally titled Admin Know-How, The responsibility of leaders sets a mood that is representative of the darker inner regions of the Scientological onion, where a moral expediency is standard operating procedure. Always push power in the directions of anyone on whose power you depend. It may be more money for the power, or more ease, or a snarling defense of the power to a critic, or even the dull thud of his enemies in the dark. As with adult Sea Org members, if the desired mindset does not occur in a child or teenager, actions must be taken to correct the situation. It's the mind control. All the punishments that Nathan Rich went through and the other children of the lower ranch, the Apple School, Delphi Academy, the cadet orgs, the Rehabilitation Project Force. The running program track is used for punishment. The Rehabilitation Project Force uses the track to force offending members of the Sea Org, like children, to run consistently in circles without stopping for up to 12 hours at a time. As with ethics on Hubbard's flagship, the RPF utilizes prolonged menial labor and mild to extreme sleep deprivation. One's environment, including one's movement or confinement, is controlled by another. RPFers, like children, wear special outfits so they can be identified, have to address non-RPFers as sir, and run wherever they go. RPFers are useful for tasks such as cleaning and renovating various Scientology properties. Per original RPF instructions, food consists of leftovers or table scraps, remaining once the rest of the Sea Org crew has eaten. Sleeping quarters are crude at best, filthy and cockroach infested at worst. Under these conditions, RPFers are also subjected to indoctrination and guided, self-critical introspection. The RPF does not appear on Scientology's grade chart and is kept behind the scenes. New recruits to Scientology, like children troll, usually don't know it exists. The original RPF writings commenced on 3 January 1974 with the issue of Flag Order 3434, followed by 28 further editions. They are confidential. According to Flag Order 3434-1, the RPF was created by the Commodore so that redemption can occur. The final act of someone completing the RPF is to write a mandatory success story. Wow. Pathetically, there are Scientologists who have spent months or even years in this indentured servant-type existence. Could they escape? Scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets. Is that what Lyra FM's father's in? I wonder if that's what Lyra FM's father is in, the RPF. Scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, being used in building renovation for such tasks as scouring paint off the walls, etc. Who will praise the gains they made on the RPF. Gains that make it possible to become standard in ethics Sea Org members. You're always having to prove yourself. It's total narcissism. There was even an account by a long-term Sea Org member who had recently left Scientology of how much he loved the RPF. Like a lifer in prison. He had grown numb to the constraints and degradation. Pre-RPF, as an upstat, he had been rewarded by being sent to work at a rural elite location. They keep using that word, you guys. Makes me wonder. One frequented by the administrative hierarchy. Prestigious executives. He reminisced on how he enjoyed working outdoors and how delicious the food could be. Food that had been prepared for the hierarchy. With the well-behaved RPFers allowed to feast on the leftovers. Laurel Sullivan was L. Ron Hubbard's personal public relations officer. Who took over then after him, Rinder? For several years, finally leaving Scientology in the early 1980s. Oh, this is a lady. She had this to say in 1986. The Church of Scientology is truly a fulfillment of George Orwell's 1984. That it has gained such support amongst Americans is testimony to the unawareness of so many who don't want to hear about accounts of Soviet dissidents such as Solzhenitsyn, Solzhenitsyn, and others. Life in the Sea Org is parallel to living beyond the Iron Curtain. The types of censorship that are imposed on Sea Org members, the selective truth, the priorities, and the emphasis on the group above all, under the guise of the greatest good for the greatest number, so closely parallel communism. In 1976, I was ordered to go to Paris to receive an honor on behalf of LRH as a writer. At the same place, there was a showing of some paintings by a Soviet dissident who had recently come over to the West. I had a series of meetings with him and some other dissidents. That was the first time I realized the degree to which I was intellectually disaffected with the Sea Org. Yet for various reasons, I stayed on for some time. I began to understand this man's life and why he was exiled to Siberia. It all sounded so similar to LRH's Rehabilitation Project Force. Filthy food, little sleep, and nearly untenable quarters. I just want to interject. The children are going through this. The brainwashing manual. There is a curve of degradation which leads downward to a point where the endurance of the individual is almost at an end. A soldier held prisoner can be abused, denied, defamed, and degraded until the slightest motion on the part of his captors will cause him to flinch. Similarly, the slightest word on the part of his captors will cause him to obey or vary his loyalties and beliefs. Experiments on German prisoners have lately demonstrated that only after 70 days of filthy food, little sleep, and nearly untenable quarters, that the least motion toward the prisoner would bring about a state of shock beyond his endurance threshold and would cause him to hypnotically receive anything said to him. They did this during the you-know-what. Go back and look at it. Tried to do videos on it, but they got flagged. Thus, it is possible in an entire stockade of prisoners to bring about a state of complete servile obedience and implant in them adequate commands to ensure their future conduct, even when released. Like no blank, no job? Hypnosis is induced by acute fear. They discovered it could also be induced by shock of an emotional nature and also by extreme privation. In 1985, former Sea Org member Howard Schomer described his time on the RPF on the flagship Apollo. You guys remember what I keep saying? Gotta keep names. We lived separated from the rest of the crew on the ship. We could not talk to them unless they originated something to us first. We slept in the lower hold of the ship, most of the time on mattresses that were supposed to have been thrown out. Luckily they weren't, because otherwise we would have been sleeping on the floor. We ate after the rest of the crew ate, and ate what was left over. I mean, I understand, like, the mind control is, like, so strong. We all can kind of empathize with that. But it could have been broken just little by little, of people just saying, F this. That's the part I don't understand. I suppose people do break out of it, like, in their own way, but I mean, and you're on a ship? You guys think LRH was scared for no reason? I mean, if LRH would have just came up missing from that ship, none of this stuff would have continued. I don't think, anyways. Jerry Armstrong. I'm sus on this guy, too. But, I mean, some people say he's a really nice guy. I don't know. Jerry Armstrong, who was also on the Apollo, left Scientology in the early 1980s. Do they have kids in there? There's no way to really describe the RPF experience. The hopelessness, the humiliation, the horror. It seemed to go on forever. The same blue boiler suits like prison garb day after day. The same questions and the same security checks. Hubbard's purpose in creating the RPF and running it as a prison with assignees considered criminals was the breaking of people's wills. I just said that earlier. It's black magic, by the way. You notice how many people's wills were broken in between 2020 to 2025? Regarding the words that the internet and YouTube don't allow us to talk about? 4 horses, anyone? That's what they play by. He achieved his purpose so well with me that I thanked him for the opportunity of doing the RPF. When the era of the flagship Apollo came to an end in October 1975, thank God, the RPF continued at the Sea Org's new headquarters at the Flag Land Base in Clearwater, Florida, and at other locations. Clearwater PD's they're fine with it. In 1997, Professor Stephen Kent, I like him, of the University of Alberta, Canada, interviewed former RPFers, one-time Sea Org members Pat, pseudonym used, recalled working on building renovation in Southern California in the 1970s. The pressure kept mounting every day with the renovations. Every day that passed, there was greater pressure to get renovations done. How many pictures have I shown you of children working on buildings? But what do I know? Until it got to the point that we were, and I swear to God this is true, we worked 30 hours on, 3 hours off. I don't know how they could function. We worked shifts of 30 hours at a time. How there's not more accidents is beyond me, to be honest. When it was time to sleep, we'd go to the roof of one of the buildings on a renovation, where it was cold and there were these damp, disgusting mattresses that we would just fall onto and sleep. I think also, too, with all this sleep deprivation, that's how they keep it going. Not allowing anyone to sleep enough. They use it in the military. From the same time period, former member Jesse Prince recalled, some people went what they call psychotic, just kind of lost their minds, no longer could associate who or what they were or what they were doing, and had to be put in isolation. Yeah, because, isolation is a cure for psychosis. Apparently, Hubbard didn't learn that one, though. Hubbard had to take medication for his psychosis. And we know that this is induced psychosis. In Forbes magazine, in a 1986 article on Scientology, described the RPF. In these sadistic detention programs, staff members would be coerced into performing hard labor, eating leftovers out of buckets, and sleeping on floors. Some were reportedly kept against their will. Well, Forbes was just trying to be careful with lawsuits, but nobody ever mentions the children. The first loyalty to himself is destroyed. Brainwashing manual. We must have a command of their values. The first loyalty to himself is destroyed by demonstrating errors to him. The RPF places special emphasis on confessional counseling. It's axiomatic to an RPFer that he or she has done lots of bad things and has many evil intentions. It is accepted that the RPFers will recall and confess these things. This includes misdeeds from the RPFers' pre-Scientology life as a WOG, plus specialized Scientological misdeeds, such as having unkind thoughts about LRH, can't ask questions, and also a vast supply of evil intentions and misdeeds from degraded earlier lifetimes. The idea of past lives is not automatically invalid because it is exploited by Scientology, but the issue is not past lives. The issue here is that an organization with a hidden agenda is using deception to recruit or convert the unsuspecting, then in the course of their training and labors for the organization, judging them to be not sufficiently cooperative or productive, at which time it imposes penalties. The individual is reduced to an overwhelmed and subservient state, like the last 5 years, and in that state repeatedly expected to demonstrate errors in himself, errors that must be there. One extreme form of confession is called gangbang security check. Just think of that name, you guys. What kind of sick fucking people. In 1994, Stacy Young, a former Sea Org member, wrote of her experience. 2 very large, strong men locked me into a room and interrogated me for hours. During the interrogation, because they can't fight fair. It's the same with all that Diddy stuff. If you guys go over and listen to Conquer Soul or any of the other channels, they never fight fair. Sign of no courage at all. During the interrogation, they screamed and swore at me, like Rinder likes to do to people, or he did. They accused me of all sorts of crimes against Scientology. They demanded that I confess to being an enemy agent. Blank, degradation, and conquest. The brainwashing manual. Degradation and conquest are companions. Degradation can be accomplished by consistent and continual defamation. Defamation is the best and foremost weapon of psychopolitics on the broad field. In 1997, former Scientologist Maura Hutchinson described her brief encounter with the RPF. They would come in the org kitchen to eat after everyone else had left. Everyone was dressed in dark blue overalls. They did not walk, they shuffled with their heads always bowed low, and no one would utter a word. Go watch Metropolis, please. David Mayo was involved with Scientology for 20 years, becoming the senior case supervisor at the Scientology Flag Land Base in Clearwater, Florida. In the middle 1970s, he exited Scientology in the early 1980s, started his own group, and eventually, after the passage of several years, was finally able to speak frankly about his experiences. So in other words, it sounds to me like Mayo was creating another cult, maybe? He was still utilizing the Scientology policies? I'm just guessing, I don't know. I won't trust someone like that. In 1986, talking with author Russell Miller, he had these observations regarding Sea Org ethics and events which led to the establishment of the RPF. Hubbard dodged paying taxes in the U.S. and bankrupted orgs in the U.S. and skipped the country. He ran afoul of the Home Office in England. I don't believe there was a shred of truth to Hubbard's stories regarding the persecution of Scientology. Then he went off to Rhodesia in 1966 and was kicked out of Rhodesia. In 1968 on the ship, Hubbard ordered everyone to be put on the e-meter, asking if they had any doubts or disagreements with his use of ethics. Might as well just, instead of using ethics, just call it torture. If the meter read reacted, the person would be put in a condition of doubt. This is insane. On the ship, the Royal Scotsman, later named the Apollo, there was an old man who he made, I've heard this one, push a peanut around the decks with his nose. He had to get down on his hands and knees. This is so sad. He had to go around the deck quite a long distance in a race with one or two others also in trouble. The first one back got let off, and the last one got a double penalty. Charles Riesdorf. There's more names, you guys. The surface of the deck was very rough, wood, prone to splinters, so after pushing peanuts with their noses, they all had raw, bleeding noses, leaving a trail of blood behind them. I not only saw it, but the entire crew of the ship was mustered. Yeah, like they muster the children. A mandatory attendance. We were required to watch this punishment. Charles Riesdorf, his two daughters, were Commodore's messengers. There's something to this, you guys. Listen to it, because I've heard the story several times. Pay close attention. Because Charles Riesdorf, I think Charles Riesdorf was trying to protect his daughters. That's what I think was going on. His two daughters were Commodore's messengers. They were 11 or 12 at the time, because, children should be doing that, right? And his wife was there also. It's hard to say which was worse, to watch this old guy with a bleeding nose or his wife and kids, sobbing and crying at being forced to watch this. Hubbard was standing there calling the shots, yelling, "Faster, faster." I believe that he was trying to stand up for his children. That's what I suspect. You know what Hubbard was, right? It was indignity, degradation, and breaking a person's will. It's black magic. And making people watch. It was disgusting. They used to have people locked up in the chain locker, including small children. The length of time for children would vary, but no one was there less than a day. 3 weeks was about the maximum. Age didn't matter. The youngest kids were 5, 6, or 7. Why don't they, when they're talking about this, Why don't they say that Scientologists believe children are adults in small bodies? Why don't they ever add that in? Hubbard, had a birthday party on March 13th, 1968. There was a woman who he ordered locked in the chain locker. And you know what? I've read this one before. I suspect that this woman was raped. I suspect that. And you're not allowed to ask for any type of punishment of the perpetrators. During the party, he had her brought out. She was filthy, covered with dirt and rust. She had been in there for a week. He said he was giving her a reprieve, but it was just flaunting her degradation. Afterwards, she was put back in. What did she do, like, that Hubbard wanted her in there? You know what I mean? I suspect she was raped by someone and was telling, you know? I'm going to stick to my story. The Children and Teenagers RPF. And there we go again. How about that, FBI? Department of Justice, Homeland Security, Child Protective Services, President Trump, LAPD, Clearwater PD, Boston PD, New York City PD. While there are accounts of Sea Org ethics applied to children dating back to the flagship days, the Cadet Org, with its own Cadet RPF, was not formally established by Hubbard until 1976. I don't know, you guys. I don't know if I buy that. TV news reporter Larry Blunt from Cocoa of Oklahoma City described a scene during August of 1989 from outside a Scientology building complex in Los Angeles. A Scientology bus loaded with young people. You see how, does nobody know how to use the word child or children? You guys see? A Scientology bus loaded with children, dressed in black, pulled up. Those are RPFers. They jogged into the Scientology complex. You know why they're putting those children in the RPF? Because the children they were asking questions. Or they just probably wanted to be children. Oh, it's just heartbreaking. A recent defector of Scientology told me they were from the church's Rehabilitation Project Force. They were found to be a problem and needed attitude adjustment. Yeah, like when you ask a question. The Clearwater Sun, in a 1984 article, told of an encounter between a reporter and a young RPFer, a child. A young man, by all appearances a teenager, otherwise known as a child, you guys, crouched in the dark, narrow stairway as he scrubbed the 6th floor landing in the former Fort Harrison Hotel. Former Fort Harrison Hotel. The flag land-based headquarters of the Church of Scientology. Are you an RPF? Queried a reporter. Sir, he asked quietly, peering up from his work. Are you an RPF? Yes, sir, I am. RPF is the Rehabilitation Project Force, which, depending on who is speaking, is either a businessman's approach to improving an employee, lagging job performance, or a form of punishment for Scientologists who are punished to severe penance for their misdeeds as bad thoughts. We don't need no thought control. 2 others, adult men who, like the youth, were dressed in blue shorts and faded blue shirts, worked 2 floors below also cleaning the stairs. They smoke not a word. Former Scientologists say that those in the RPF are not to speak unless spoken to. Some kind of a silent treatment, sort of. Those who have spent time in the RPF at the Fort Harrison tell a harrowing, because it's got to be harrowing, you guys. You guys know I really suspect that word. I know what I think. I'll get into it one day. Tell a harrowing tale of long hours of work, as much as 100 hours a week, and of months of humiliation and mental abuse at the hands of other Scientologists. But their vivid recollections of hard work and abuse contradict current Church of Scientology statements that the RPF is an entirely voluntary program. It's always they're out. A certain amount of fear. The brainwashing manual. A certain amount of fear or terror. Terror. Where have we heard that before? Must be engendered in the person under treatment, being indoctrinated, so that this person will then take immediate orders, completely and unquestionably, from the psychopolitical operative, Scientology. On the subject of obedience itself, the most optimum obedience is unthinking obedience. Punishments from Scientology to Scientologists have the added significance of being administered to persons who believe the source of that punishment is the ultimate authority on all things having to do with the mind and spirit. Scientology promises infinite pleasure to those who cooperate with it, and infinite pain to those who don't. It also has access to the membership's private thoughts and personal experiences through detailed counseling files, and has a history of using personal counseling information in any way that it deems furthers its own ends. The RPF's RPF, those who don't respond to the redemption offered on the RPF, are sentenced to the RPF's RPF. According to Flag Conditions Order of 24 April 1974, RPFers are 1. Segregated from the RPF members with regard to work, messing, meals, birthing, musters, and any other activity. 2. No pay. 3. No training. 4. No auditing. 5. May only work on mud boxes in the ER. And I'm just going to look this over real quick here, because I guess the United States government, they don't know how to get access to these policies. So how many crimes are we looking at right here? Well, number one is definitely isolation. It could, if it's children, it can be considered neglect. I don't know what you would call when you're making people that are adults eat beans and rice. Corporal punishment, maybe? I don't know if that would count. No pay, that's illegal. That's illegal. Can't just withhold people's money like that. No training. I don't know what that would be considered. Anyways. Engine room or at comparable land-based labor. 6 hours sleep, birthing time maximum. That's also illegal right there, what they're doing. 7 is under the RPF MAA, a Master at Arms, is a Sea Org Ethics Officer, which, by the way, they can be a child. It can be a child. 8 standard ethics penalties that apply to them to be triple for each offense. 9 may communicate only with the RPF MAA. While it's possible that Scientology's non-staff member paying public might glimpse a well-behaved RPFer on rare occasion. He or she would not see an inmate of the RPF's RPF. Such an inmate would be out of sight, having been segregated from the RPF members and allowed to communicate only with the RPF Master-at-Arms or Ethics Officer. The confinement aspect of the RPF and the RPF's RPF can be understood as a logical extension of Hubbard's non-confidential writings on psychotics and on the subject of leaving. One, the Scientology Counselors Auditor's Code states that counselors are not to let the pre-clear person receiving counseling end session, leave the session on his own determinism. LAPD, is that false imprisonment? Please tell us. 2. Hubbard Bulletin of 31 December AD 9, 1959, blow-offs, states that people leave because of their own overts, harmful actions, and withholds secrets. You know, it just hit me. You can't have any of your own thoughts in Scientology. I mean, we kind of all knew that, but that's the thing with all the secrets, the withholds, and they really pummel people. They pummel the children as well. Man, this is messed up. Oh, hold on. Okay. 3. Hubbard Bulletin entitled Psychosis of 28 November 1970 describes as a sign of insanity. They often seek transfers or wish to leave. You can check in anytime you like, but you just can't. What does it go? Like, you can check in, but you can't check out. I just can't remember the words. 4. According to Hubbard in Science of Survival, people judged to be psychotic should have no rights and be uniformly institutionalized. Anti-Scientology equals antisocial personality equals psychotic. 5. The antisocial personality, the anti-Scientologist, of 27 September 1966, is reprinted in the book Scientology Ethics. It states, if society were to recognize this personality type as a sick being, as they now isolate people with smallpox, both social and economic recoveries could occur. A person's level of sanity is to be determined by his opinion of Scientology. Those who persist in expressing critical opinions, kind of like how we couldn't have any critical opinions of the V, critical opinions of Scientology in a Scientology society would be institutionalized. Scientology doesn't have the power, but can sometimes institutionalize, lock up its own people. I also thought that alone was against the law. I know I've read that somewhere, where in the United States, and I imagine a lot of governments, organizations are not allowed to create their own governing bodies. Something like that. 6. The idea of confinement is mentioned in the policy letter of 18 October 1967. Penalties for lower conditions. Is that why they called that ranch the lower ranch? I bet it is. Liability suspension of pay and a dirty gray rag on left arm, and day and night confinement to org premises. Something to this rag on the arms. I'm going to look into that one. 7. The 20 February 1974 Bulletin Introspection Rundown. Additional actions refers to what to write on notes, slipped under the door to someone in confinement. Dear Joe, what can you guarantee me if you are let out of isolation. I'm sorry, but no, go on coming out of isolation yet. This bulletin was written 1 month after the first RPF issue and 2 months before the first RPF issue. The Scientological mindset is that people only want to leave Scientology because they've secretly done bad things. Since Scientology is their only hope, preventing people from leaving would be a good and noble deed. A not sufficiently cooperative Sea Org member, finding himself in a condition of forced confinement, will likely have conflicted feelings about the matter. The idea that someone can be held against his will becomes, then, complicated by the possibility that the person's independent will may have already been largely handled or erased. As counterintention to LRH intention, Sea Org members are expected to be unquestioning conveyances for LRH intention, also called command intention. Professor Stephen Kent notes in his Brainwashing in Scientology's Rehabilitation Project Force, under the category of forcible confinement, former Sea Org members spoke about either being forcibly confined themselves or seeing others who were. Jesse Prince insists that he saw metal cages, that's a very satanic thing, you guys, in the RPF's RPF in the basement of the Los Angeles Cedars-Sinai building, where the inmates were locked up at night to ensure that they wouldn't try to escape. Go do some research about P. Diddy and all the people that they kept in cages. I know what I'm talking about. On the East Coast, Dennis Elric, while on the RPF, joked about his RPF assignment, and in accordance with Hubbard's policy against joking about the RPF, wound up in the RPF's RPF. Unreal. In Fort Harrison's basement. How many times, you guys, have we heard about things going on in the Fort Harrison hotel basement as well as the Blue Building basement? They like to keep people down in those basements. I think it's partly because maybe they think it's harder for them to escape. I can't remember if it was Nora talking about that when she was trying to leave, that they were interrogating her in the basement of the Blue Building, I think. I've heard stories like that several times. Okay. Guarded down there for 10 days, Elric states that he spent his first day or two locked in a wire cage. Hannah Whitfield swore that while she was on the RPF in the Fort Harrison in Clearwater, Florida, Lynn Froyland was assigned to the RPF's RPF and was chained to a pipe down there in the basement for weeks under guard. That's sick, man. She was taking meals and allowed toilet breaks, but no other hygiene. That's horrible. It just sounds very similar to a lot of the stories of people that were locked up by P. Diddy. And it's like it's actually way more satanic, but it's the same thing. He wouldn't let people shower or clean up. To put accounts of mistreatment on the RPF and the RPF's RPF into perspective, from the standpoint of Scientology doctrine, keep in mind that those being rehabilitated would likely be considered in a state of confusion, which is two ethics conditions below enemy. At enemy, a person is not considered to have any civil rights of any kind. How about that, you guys? It's not surprising then that being an RPF's RPFer can be a physically and psychologically perilous activity. New recruits to the Sea Org have no idea of what awaits them, should they find themselves suddenly demoted from the status of the elite of mankind to the lowly status of degraded being and psychotic, and then having been broken down, and their sense of self diminished or deflated, they are to be reinflated with a new sense of self in the image of Scientology. I just thought of something. These evildoers really do like to mess with people's idea or vision of themselves, of who they are. You know, like I talked about in the Marines, they take the name away. You no longer have a name. Whereas in the Army, they allow you to have your last name, and they just take your first name away. So it's like something with your identity. And we know what's all going on right now. I don't want to get into that. But why would you ever allow anyone else to tell you who you are? You understand what I'm saying? Sea Org writings and tape lectures, with rare exception, are inaccessible to all but Sea Org members. And even they are shown them only on a need-to-know basis. Imagine all this time and the FBI could never get a hold of them. References to such things as confinement, punishment, obedience, sleep deprivation, etc. can be found in this segment of Scientology doctrine. That right there, that's all that these federal authorities would need to break it down. Because all of this is breaking United States laws. All of it is. You guys know. Inaccessible as these writings are, they nonetheless have degrees of confidentiality within themselves. Some are formally labeled confidential, some are highly confidential. A better understanding of what happens to Sea Org members and those subjected to rehabilitation by the Sea Org would no doubt be possible were its doctrinal materials fully available and examined. As I said, in Scientology is determined that this not occur. It's all Scientology that prevents anyone from getting them, right? Sea Org strata policy and tech issues include AIDS orders, base flag orders, base orders, Central Bureau orders, Flag Bureau data letters, Central Office of LRH Executive directives, Commodore staff orders. I'm not going to read all that. You guys can go look if you want. The 5-card team share system. Sea Org members not on the RPF or RPF's RPF are nevertheless subjected to the behaviorist system of reward and punishment. Sit, Ubu, sit. One such system previously in use was known as the Team Share or 5-card system. Sea Organization Executive Directive 3490, International introduced the new system. A brilliant system is being put into your org, which heavily validates those staff who are actively working on contributing to and achieving your org's purpose of 5.4 times statistics, meaning to increase one's production by 5.4 times before Hubbard's birthday. At the same time, this system penalizes downstat statistic staff who are not actively contributing. There are 5 team shares, and you, as a team member of the group, will be issued 5 cards. 1. Social card blue, 2. Bonus card green, 3. Allowance card orange, 4. Birthing card yellow, 5. Chow card red. The social card permits staff members to participate in any social activities such as liberty parties, sport events, special meals, outings, and the like. The bonus card allows them to have a bonus in addition to the regular Sea Org allowance. The birthing card makes possible space in which to sleep. The chow card allows the staff members to receive food at meal times from the organization. A staff member who is pulling his weight and taking responsibility for the org as a whole, like a child, is allowed to keep all 5 cards. Having all 5 cards, he is then entitled to wear a silver star. This is how narcissists are created. I'm not saying every single person in Scientology is. I don't mean that. It's all that conditional love, you know what I mean? If a staff member is being downstat or generally unproductive or uncooperative, he starts losing his cards one at a time. Loss of one card results in the loss of his silver star. This is very, how do I say it? Systematic. Hubbard didn't just create this. I'm here to tell you. Loss of all cards means the person goes on rice and beans while living in pig's birthing. The directive continues. The Sea Org is the most ethical group this planet has ever known. What a joke. Or will know. Star high standards are enforced. Those who have other fish to fry show up fast on the team share system and can be quickly handled. In 1987, Vicky and Rick Asnaran left the Sea Org. The following is a 1988 account of their experience of the team member share system, also called the 5-card system. The team share system consists of privately issued money in exchange for food, board, pay, bonuses, and liberty. The team member system required the Asnarans be given one of each of these cards when the church administration was satisfied with their work production. In loyalty to the organization, any dissatisfaction with the work output or attitude of the Asnarans would result in revocation of tokens, thereby requiring them to work long hours with no days off, no pay, no board, requiring them to sleep outdoors on the ground, and substandard nutrition consisting only of rice, beans, and water. When they had lost all their cards as a matter of course, they would be sent to the Rehabilitation Project Force. They had been subjected to lengthy interrogations, sudden involuntary and forcible separation of spouses for many months, deliberately inducing fatigue by physical abuse and deprivation of sleep, forcing the Asnarans to be housed in animal quarters, deliberately confining them to premises under the control of Scientology and under threat of physical harm without allowing the Asnarans to leave on their own free will, and threatening them that their failure to submit to the power and control of Scientology would result in their becoming fair game. Despite efforts by Scientology to silence former members, accounts of the RPF's RPF, and related activities in tech are becoming more numerous, and many make the preceding account seem mild in comparison. The technologies of psychopolitics. The brainwashing manual. The technologies of psychopolitics are graduated upon the scale which starts somewhat above removal of the individual himself, upward toward the removal only of those tendencies which will bring his lack of cooperation. In possession of all 5 cards and proudly displaying his silver star. That's like military, isn't it? Upon the lapel of his jacket. Yeah, it is sort of. It is. The inethic Sea Org member would praise this system of reward tokens used to enforce behavior. It's a token system. A system, interestingly enough, which is similar to that used in some mental institutions. Yeah. I've seen this somewhere. Maybe if LRH was like in a mental institution is where you got this. I don't know. The brainwashing manual. The psychopolitical dupe Sea Org member is a well-trained individual, lies, who serves in complete obedience to the Scientology Sea Org psychopolitical operative. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night, wherever you are. Peace.